Imagine a world where the Cold War didn't remain cold. Instead of decades of tense standoffs and nuclear brinkmanship, the United States and the Soviet Union actually came to blows, sparking a global conflict unlike anything humanity had ever seen. What would this reality look like? How would it change our social fabric, our politics, our technological progress, and the very survival of our species? In this episode of Go Hard History, we'll explore a chilling scenario. What if the Cold War turned hot? To understand how quickly the Cold War could have escalated, we first need to revisit the tense geopolitical climate of the mid-20th century. After World War II, the world was essentially split between two superpowers, the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. Both sides sought to expand their ideological influence, arming themselves with nuclear weapons and building formidable military alliances, NATO in the west, the Warsaw Pact in the east. In our timeline, these alliances engaged in proxy wars and espionage rather than direct military conflict. But in this alternate reality, a single miscalculation or accidental spark triggers a full-scale confrontation between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, one that threatens to engulf the entire planet in nuclear fire. Many historians point to events like the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 as the closest we ever came to a hot war. In this alternate world, imagine the crisis doesn't end with a last-minute compromise. Instead, tensions spiral out of control when neither Khrushchev nor Kennedy is willing to back down. A Soviet submarine commander misinterprets a US Navy depth charge as an attack. Believing war has already started, he orders a nuclear torpedo launch at an American aircraft carrier. Within hours, both superpowers mobilize. The United States responds with strikes on Soviet missile sites in Cuba. The Soviets retaliate with air and naval operations in the Atlantic. As the conflict escalates, each side faces a grim choice: risk the use of nuclear weapons or face overwhelming conventional losses. In this world, the arms race becomes more than just a show of strength. It rapidly devolves into actual deployments of cutting-edge technology on the battlefield. Nuclear weapons are unleashed as ICBMs and submarine-launched missiles strike bases and industrial centers. Strategic bombers from both sides target major cities, putting places like Moscow, Washington, London, and Berlin under immediate threat. On the ground in Europe, the Fulda Gap in Germany becomes a flashpoint for massive tank battles. The Atlantic transforms into a deadly chessboard of Soviet submarines and US carrier strike groups. Technology might advance in terms of new weapons research, but the devastation inflicted on major industrial and scientific hubs could also set back broader human progress. The social consequences would be profound. Across the globe, civilians endure rationing, blackouts, and constant air raid drills. Bomb shelters become commonplace, while governments impose strict censorship and tighten control over their populations. In the United States, the Red Scare grows even stronger, leading to widespread paranoia about Soviet sympathizers. In the Soviet Union, Stalinist-style purges could resurface under the banner of national security. Massive displacements occur throughout Europe and Asia as refugees flee the fighting, creating an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Popular culture becomes dominated by wartime propaganda, and instead of the free-spirited cultural movements of the 1960s, a climate of fear and conformity sets in. Economically, the conflict causes global trade routes to collapse or be blockaded by naval warfare. Industrial output is either destroyed or diverted exclusively to the war effort. Both blocs scramble for oil, steel, and other resources, pushing neutral countries to align or risk invasion. Western financial institutions could relocate or crumble under the strain of war, while the Soviet command economy ramps up. Black markets and bartering become the norm as traditional currency systems falter. Politically, the repercussions would be immense. Non-aligned countries like India or Egypt might be forced to choose sides. The already strained Sino-Soviet relationship could prompt China to seek its own advantage, possibly opening another front or attempting to become a dominant power in Asia. Within NATO and the Warsaw Pact, not every member would be willing to face nuclear annihilation, causing internal dissension that might tear these alliances apart. This reshuffling of political loyalties and alliances would complicate the war and make an already volatile situation even more explosive. So how might the war end? One worst-case scenario is a total nuclear exchange in which entire cities are obliterated, leaving regions uninhabitable and billions dead from blasts, radiation, and famine. Another possibility is that both sides, horrified by the first use of nuclear weapons, quickly negotiate a ceasefire, though even a limited nuclear war would have devastating effects on infrastructure and long-term global health. A third scenario might see both sides avoid nuclear escalation, but engage in a prolonged conventional stalemate, particularly in Europe. Eventually, attrition and pressure from neutral nations could force an uneasy armistice, with new borders drawn and a radically altered geopolitical landscape. In any of these outcomes, the planet would look vastly different. Cities that once thrived could become ghostly remnants. Entire governments might collapse, giving rise to smaller statelets. Rising nations could take advantage of the power vacuum left by a devastated United States or Soviet Union. The balance of power might shift dramatically, and human civilization could struggle for decades, if not centuries, to recover from the catastrophic toll of war. Ultimately, a hot Cold War would have reshaped the course of human history, potentially throwing us back by generations. The fact that the real Cold War never escalated to global nuclear conflict is a testament to the power of diplomacy and the fear of mutual destruction. But history often hinges on a single decision or a single moment of misunderstanding. As we reflect on this chilling what if, let's appreciate the precarious nature of peace and remember how close humanity once came to the brink. If you found this alternate history exploration fascinating, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more thought-provoking journeys into the past that could have been. Thank you for watching, and remember, history is often one decision away from a completely different outcome.